I was saying oftentimes we make a big deal out of the phone and what happens in the fall. But in a way, what happens today may ultimately be more important. Sort of walk us through what you expect today.
And this is the lead-in to the phone, right? You have 5,000 developers. This is the Worldwide Developers Conference that are meant to get, hyped up about what the new operating system offers and how they're going to update their apps or create new apps for the product that follows in 3 months. So it's important as a lead in there. It also sets the stage as far as where the company is headed, where services, which is now 20% of revenue 3 years ago, was 11% of revenue. So they really want to start developing and focus on the developers themselves to think about ways to drive new subscription type services.
And so what are you expecting? I mean, what's the big highlight in your mind?
I mean, there's not really a big highlight. Frankly, the stock sells off most of the time on the day of WWDC because there's nothing really revolutionary. For me, I mean, look, the stock's off 18% in the past month on all these China concerns. The CEO of the company is going to be up in a high-profile situation. It would be great if he updated us on what the situation is in China.
Do you expect him to say a word about China?
I don't expect him to. I'm hoping that he will. I mean, he made a big deal about this on the last quarterly call, saying things were improving in China. So he might need to clean up those comments now since he's built up an expectation of growth into the quarter.
If Apple fundamentally needed to change its supply chain, long term, how quickly could it do it? What would it take? What would the cost be?
It's certainly not something we've analyzed. It's hard to know, but I mean, you're talking about 1 million plus people making this product. It's a high precision type of product. It just doesn't happen overnight. There was a news story, I think, about Pegatron or Tim Cook reaching out to Pegatron to start on the iPads, but I mean,
Fox kind of looked like it was looking to build other plants in other countries too, even if it were existing suppliers in China who would potentially move offshore.
You can build the plants there, then you have to hire and train the people, and you have to get the equipment there. I mean, that takes time. Look, the threat of that to China should be enough. If they start moving a lot of that manufacturing out of the country, that obviously has negative repercussions for that country. If it moves, it's not coming back. If you're going to make that much of an investment to move manufacturing out of China.
The other piece of this, and I wanted to get your comments on it, we have this news over the weekend about Google, really about Amazon, too, with the FTC looking at Amazon, Justice Department splitting this up. What do you think this means long-term for sort of tech writ large?
I mean, Joe is talking about it being different. There is one similar thing. I mean, they're just going after big companies because they're big. And a lot of this has to do perhaps with how the election is going to go one way or another. But just because something's big, the companies call this ecosystem. It's improving the services for the end consumer.
So let me ask you a question. What would happen, and Elizabeth Warren has called for this, what would happen
Called it a utility. She wants to be a platform utility.
What would happen if the App Store on the Apple phone had to be operated by an independent company? What would that do to the services business component of their franchise and the revenue that they're trying to grow there?
It's been pretty clear that the value that Apple has built to the consumer over the years is not just the hardware. It's not just the software, it's the combination of the two. And even what they're doing today with the developers conference is providing these 5,000 developers with an opportunity to make money on their platform.
But what do you think?
Has the standard changed? I think the question is, because I'm looking at some of the things they're laying out even for Google. If you could no longer get that search box, that search text, that means that 63% of users no longer click through on the Google query that they put in. If the standard has changed, I mean, personally, I think that'd be bad for consumers, but it might be good for competition. Are we looking at more of an EU style of anti-competitiveness?
I mean, it depends how you look at competition. Part of competition is funding new companies. Is the venture capital world going to fund companies if they don't think that Apple or Google or Amazon is there as a potential buyer for those companies? When Amazon bought Whole Foods, has that been bad for the consumer?
But I just wonder if the standards have changed here. I mean, because I don't think you can look at any of these necessarily and say, okay, this is bad for the consumer with Amazon, with any of the things Apple's done, with any of those issues. But if you are talking about regulators taking notice, does that mean the standard for regulation here in the United States has changed to look more like an EU style?
Well, it hasn't changed yet, but obviously there's a populist element to this. There's bipartisan support for a lot of this stuff. But I think a lot of this, again, will hinge on the election and what Senator Warren says. We'll see what some of the other Democrats
Why do you think it's going to hinge on the election insofar as this is under the Trump administration right now that they're looking at these big tech companies? By the way, if the election happens,
and the Democrats like them
even more.
Right.
That's true. It could be just a little bit more aggressive in the pursuit. Let's put things in perspective. I mean, we've had Microsoft We had AT&T, and there was, I guess, an attempt with IBM. I mean, this is not something that happens overnight or something that regularly happens. So there's a building concern here. We'll see how the companies deal with it.